Good morning, everybody. We're going to talk about the importance of humor in the world, in our lives, and in our Christian lives. I'm Jerry O'Lennon. This is Alfredo Romero of Rock of Life Fellowship, Pastor Brennan DeForest of Redeemer Evangelical Lutheran Church. Let me tell you why I got started on this. I saw an interesting article in American Thinker, and it's written by, well, it doesn't matter who it's written by because I can't find his name. Armando Simon. And he talks
Armando.
about, he says, a curious characteristic of totalitarian communist regimes is, quote, the dearth, if not the total absence of comedy. No comedy films were ever made in the Soviet Union or in any other
Oh,
communist countries. That's probably true. Cinemas in communist countries were almost always empty, the films being so mind-numbingly abysmal. And I started thinking about this, and I thought, that's a good point. The importance of humor. And there are some people who believe that we're trying to restrict humor now in the United States. And that's a concern. And I want to talk to our guests about the importance of humor in our lives. And I'll begin by saying, opening it up and saying, is this something that you have noticed where like humor is kind of criticized because it's not politically correct always?
what do you think?
That's an excellent question, and I suppose thinking kind of broadly, we are a lot more serious these days. I think, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I think there is a little bit of a dearth of comedy right now.
Mm-hmm.
Even dad jokes get made fun of, and that's the classic thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, and comic strips, people are still putting them out, but I read them and it's like, that's not very funny.
They're more
Yeah.
political in nature.
Yeah, I think what happens is there's comedians that are coming out now saying that politics has ruined comedy. Matter of fact, a very famous comedian just came out and said that recently. One of them was Jerry Seinfeld, saying that we've been put politics into comedy so much that if you make fun of somebody in a joking way, somehow it's an attack. So I think a lot of way politics has ruined comedy for sure. I do know it's one of those things that all the gloves used to say gloves came off. He just made fun of everybody. Somebody like Don Rickles couldn't. I don't think he could last now.
Kind of thing that I think we should take comedy in this sense, take comedy seriously.
Yeah, I would. There's so many people that think that like Jesus was void of humor or
Right, yeah.
that he was so serious, just floated everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
But don't forget, God invented laughter. He invented humor,
Yeah.
and probably the biblical word for it is joy.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite Bible verses is Psalm 2:4, where it's talking about the rulers that no longer felt they needed God, that they could do things on their own, basically. And it says, "The one enthroned in heaven laughs or scoffs at them." And I thought that was great. Like it's like God saying, I'm going to paraphrase, like God saying, "Are you kidding me? You think you don't need me? You think you guys got it all figured out? Boy, wait till you find out." It's kind of one of those things where God scoffs at them, laughs at them.
I hear sermons, and sometimes the preacher will begin the sermon with a joke, a good natured. There's a difference between comedy and humor. Humor kind of envelops people. It brings people
Yeah.
in with you. It's a uniting type of comedy, humor, and I see pastors do that, and it immediately gets the audience, the congregation, listening. I wonder, and I always wondered because I think Jesus probably had a wonderful sense of humor, but I'm guessing, and correct me if I'm wrong. There's no way of knowing this. I don't think Because I'm just
In John chapter 3, we know he's making a joke there because of his use of language.
Don't tell me about that.
So right, double entendre is a category of language, right, where you say one thing, but it means a second thing underneath it, right? So Nicodemus is talking to Jesus, and Jesus says you have to be born again, and Nicodemus is like, so I have to be born from my mother's womb again, and no, Jesus is like, it's funny, right? It's meant to be funny. You need to be born of water and the Spirit, right? So he uses the Greek language to make jokes throughout the New Testament, throughout the Gospels.
I wonder because when the New Testament writers, the gospel writers, put their books together, there probably were a lot of. And you're on the road with a bunch of men, you're kind of hanging out, and you're talking. I'm sure there must have been moments of lightheartedness, but I'm assuming maybe the gospel writers, and there's no way of knowing this, I suppose, said, we have to focus on the serious nature of Jesus and his humanity and what he brought to the table, and not talk about maybe some of the jokes that he had, which we see, I think, unfortunately, in the television series The Chosen, where we see Jesus having a tremendous personality, very funny at times, really laugh out loud funny with some of the things he says, but there's no scriptural basis for it, which is what troubles me. But I don't doubt that there's probably some truth to that.
But there had to be.
But
Yeah, go ahead.
but also with his parables, right? You read along in some of the parables, and he sets you up. He sets you up to expect one thing, and you think that this is going to happen, and then what does Jesus do? He pulls out the rug, right? And it's like, no, it's like this, right? So I think about the wheat and the tares. He's setting you all up so that you can say with the disciples, yeah, pull out the weeds that got sowed by the enemy in the middle of the night. You want to say that. And then what does Jesus do? He laughs and he's like, no. You need to leave the wheat in the ground. You need to leave the weeds in the ground, because if you don't, then the wheat's going to get pulled up too, and it's all going to die together. It's just very funny when we're looking for it.
Right. Yeah, I'm gonna give you a few scriptures here. Proverbs 17:22, a joyful heart is good medicine. And of course, joyful always is synonymous with things like laughter, humor,
I think that
joy.
Joy goes a little bit deeper than humor and comedy.
Absolutely.
Right.
But you got to think about, I'm not saying that this is comedy, but I'm saying a joyful heart is good medicine. Well, when I'm joyful, I'm lighthearted. I don't let the worries and the troubles, weight on me. And when I think that the joy of the Lord is my strength, what is joy? Joy is happiness. Joy is this spiritual depth of contentment.
And yet also for the joy before Jesus, that's why he went to the cross, right?
And
there's both aspects of it.
I have to point this out that I don't have this memorized. I'm looking online about this, so it's not like I have scripture memorized. I'm, truth in advertising here. I guess Ecclesiastes
I was just
says
going to
about
read that.
a time to laugh.
Just going to read that. Ecclesiastes 3:4, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, etc. A time to love, a time to war.
Pretty famous from the Footloose movie, of course.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, really?
Kevin Bacon goes up before the pastor at a public meeting so the kids can hold a dance. Yeah. And he's saying, let me read this to you, because dancing had been banned because of a car accident several years before where kids were killed. And he says, no, it's time to bring back the dancing. And he goes up to the pastor and reads Ecclesiastes 3:4. Yeah. Hey, your Bible says there is a time to dance. David danced. And he gets real adamant. Look at the Bible. David danced before the Lord. Why can't, this is our time to dance before the Lord. I just love that movie.
And even the pastor's wife has to smile.
Even the pastor's life is like, I remember, honey, when we were dancing.
When do Christians go overboard in humor? Is it okay to mock those who mock God?
Yeah.
And I bring this up because the Bible contains instances such as Elijah mocking the prophets of Baal. Is that how you say it? B-A-A-L?
Yeah.
This is in First Kings.
He says to them, maybe your God is on the toilet. Maybe your God's on vacation. It's hilarious.
Really?
Yes.
Well, the people had called upon their God to do this wondrous work and make it rain and things like that. And they prayed and nothing happened. And Elijah's
this.
all like, oh, maybe he's indisposed at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
He literally says maybe he's going to the bathroom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
in
that
Hebrew.
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So, see, this is encouraging. So the idea of mocking, not a non-believer, mocking somebody who is antagonistic toward God. There's a difference between somebody who is a non-believer and somebody who is antagonistic toward God. Could we agree with that?
No, I don't think we should mock anybody. I think we're only allowed to mock false gods.
Okay.
I think only, Rebecca, when she was leaving well, never mind. It's a little bit more crude, but that was a mocking story as well. And it was only false gods. And Elijah was only mocking Baal. He wasn't mocking the prophets.
I just remembered Ten Commandments of Edward G. Robinson. Where's your God now, Moses? Where's your God now? It's like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
You got the gangster of New York.
Poorly cast.
Yeah, poorly in Egypt as one of the leaders. Yeah.
Yeah, the casting director was a real fail on that one. I know.
He messed up on that
Edward G. Robinson in a biblical epic. It didn't fit.
one. It didn't fit.
Because I think that if we're mocking people, that is automatically kind of closing the door for
A change.
yeah, for
I'd
preaching
agree
the
with that.
gospel to them.
I'd agree with that.
But and of course, we're not God. But didn't God do some mocking? I think it was in Psalm 2. I can't remember.
That was it.
And didn't God kind of laugh at them for those of you who think you could do without me? Of course, he's God, and we're not.
Well, the word.
He who sits in the heavens laughs. He who puts them into derision. Right. That's again. There's false gods. Right. What gods are you following? God's laughing at the false gods you set up.
That you don't
Oh.
think you need the God of the universe, the true God, but you put your faith in these false gods.
Yeah.
God's going to laugh at that.
Yeah.
I mean, God invented laughter, humor, and on all different forms. There's that lighthearted laugh. There's that, joyful laugh. Even despite troubled times, we can still laugh. And I remember when my father had passed away, at the funeral, the celebration of life really was wonderful.
And welcome back. We're talking about the importance of humor in a Christian's relationship with the Lord. And we have Pastor Brennan DeForest, the pastor at Redeemer Evangelical Lutheran Church, and of course Alfredo Romero, the pastor of Rock of Life Fellowship, co-host. Do you make it a point sometimes to use humor in your sermons? At the beginning of the show, I always thought that that's a great way to bring people aboard, to get people, again, and they're actually, nowadays, there must be somewhere a joke where a website for jokes for pastors before they begin their sermons, because sometimes I hear the same ones over and over again. I'm asking kind of seriously, is there a place where you go and say, I need a good joke to set up my sermon today?
Yeah, two Pharisees walking to the bar.com. No, I'm just kidding.
There's way too much, just out of principle, because I don't want to be like Joel Osteen. I don't start off with jokes, right? Because he goes on, what's the first thing he says? I like to start with something funny, and then he tells
Right.
a joke. And I'm not Joel Osteen. I don't preach the prosperity gospel, right? I think so. And you know my church. It's a little bit more serious.
Yeah.
The times where I have begun a sermon with something humorous, it does go over well, right? But I also try to start sermons in a variety of ways. And so if you catch me in Bible study, I'm much more relaxed, and I try to throw in a little bit more jokes.
Yeah, I think if the joke or the anecdote, it relates somehow to the sermon you're giving, it probably works.
Yeah.
And the one I hear so much is the guy where it's raining and there's a flood and he's standing on the rooftop of the house. You hear this so often, and somebody comes by with a plane and says, "Come on board." He says, "No, I'm going to let God take care of me." Then somebody comes by with a boat and says, "No, I'm going to." And then he winds up drowning, and he says, "God, why didn't you save me?" He says, "Well, I sent you a boat and I sent you a plane and a helicopter. What else more do you want?" It's a good joke, and of course I didn't tell it very
Wait a
right.
minute, I gotta
very
write
well.
that down for the Sunday.
Yeah, but that is one that is used it's used over and over again, and when it's told properly, it's a knee slapper. But so I guess
Well, I use humor,
Yeah.
but I don't use humor on purpose. I'm kind of a humorous, natural part of my personality that God gave me. I don't intend to write down jokes on my sermon. I don't. But there are times during the messages, not every message, that something comes to my mind, and I don't sit there and I don't in the middle of my sermon. That reminds me of a joke.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Two Pharisees walking to a bar, and I'm like, I don't do that. But just naturally, the way God has made my personality, my approach and delivery of the messages, there are times of just, I guess, joyful humor in a sense, and it always has to do with the scripture in some way. And there's some sermons where it's just deeply serious, and in other words, there's no part for humor in that sense. But otherwise, you can go to my the website for the church, and or YouTube, and you can look at some of the messages. They range in variety of whatever God tells me to say.
The late theologian Charles Hodge said, "Foolish talking and jesting are not the ways in which Christian cheerfulness should express itself, but rather giving of thanks."
Yes.
And so I think sometimes maybe you got to be careful. And that's kind of where we get to from the beginning.
It cannot be disrespectful.
It can't be disrespectful. And it made me think about today's humor and maybe not getting away from religion as much, but it doesn't seem like we have the comedians of yesteryear and that were that made everybody laugh. Now it's either Greg Gutfield on the right destroying those on the left, or Jimmy Kimmel on the left destroying those on the right with so-called comedy. And I'm not afraid to say this, neither one of them are funny. They come across harsh, they come across mean-spirited, and I long for the days of a Steve Martin appearance on the Johnny Carson show, where it's just funny. There's no
Right now, the
political humor.
millennials are looking up Steve Martin. But
Steve
go ahead.
Martin, go to YouTube, hit Steve Martin and on the Tonight Show, and you will laugh out loud. And there's nothing offensive about anything he says, and it's wonderful. And that humor, I think the closest we have maybe today is somebody like a Steve Martin, maybe somebody like a Jerry Seinfeld.
Real quick, I wanted to correct myself on something. Steve Martin is very well known right now among young people. He's got a very popular show called Murders in a Building with Martin Short.
Good show. Have you seen it?
No.
I saw the first show and went, I love Steve Martin, but this isn't for me.
Huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it actually, I saw one of the episodes with him and Martin Short, and I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, it is funny.
Yeah.
But just not for me. But what were you going to say? I interrupted.
I mean, when I was in college, we would watch Key and Peele videos. Those were always hilarious.
Yeah,
right?
a little-
Probably well known for the substitute teacher one. I mean, sometimes they could be, I wouldn't say political. Sometimes they could be a little bit crass, but or Studio C is also very good, right? And that's put out by BYU, so you know that it's gonna be. Studio C is pretty funny.
Yeah, it is.
Have you ever gone to Babylon Bee?
Oh, love Babylon Bee. Yeah.
Babylon Bee does what maybe we should or shouldn't do, but they do it very effectively. They kind of, I don't want to say mock, maybe ridicule, I don't know, those non-believers. And maybe not non-believers, I don't want to say that, but those who might oppose Christianity.
They just take reality and they really call it out, right? And sometimes the best thing with Babylon Bee is just the headlines. You don't even have to read the article. It's like The Onion. It's satire. But then they also have Not the Bee that actually reports the news.
I didn't know that. But
Yeah.
the same
Not
group
the
of
Bee.
people? The same group of people?
Same group.
Yeah, they say not the bee, and in other words, it just takes a different take on topics of the news in a not so mocking way.
Well, Not the Bee actually reports the news. The Babylon Bee is the satire one.
Yeah, it's different.
Yeah.
The biggest thing, though, is that there are Christian comedians out there that are quite popular, and they do very well. Nate Bargatze, he's got a new movie coming out. It's Christian, and matter of fact, he's going to be in the Venue in Roseville, or Lincoln. I think in about a month or so. He's very popular right now.
Do you believe that, well, I think we all agree that Jesus probably had a wonderful sense of humor. Do you think that, in retrospect, 2,000 years later, that the gospel writers should have incorporated some of that in their gospels?
I just don't think it would have come out how it was supposed to, It should have been, what do we know about comedy? The delivery is always part of it. And so if if you're reading something in the Gospels and you're really down in the dumps, and then suddenly, you know, you get this joke from Jesus, that's just gonna feel
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
gonna feel off, right? Right. So sometimes you need to actually be looking for it if you want to find the comedy, the humor.
I agree. And you can't put everything that Jesus did or said in the Bible. Matter of fact, there's a passage of many more works that Jesus did than this that are reported, because they wouldn't even fit in this Bible. They wouldn't even
right.
fit in this letter. So there are other things. But there was okay, you guys remember Jesus of Nazareth, or Robert Powell, came out in the 70s. Very serious Jesus. Very good-looking Jesus, you know, piercing blue eyes. Very serious. He's practically floating through the
Yeah,
whole thing.
it was a beachcomber.
Yeah, it
Jesus.
was totally cool. Well, there's another movie that came out about Jesus after that, just simply called Jesus. Now, they added humor to this. Not like it was a comedy, but there's moments of Jesus's relaxed moments. And there was one scene where they have this ball, and they're kind of playing kill the man with the ball. Kind of the disciples are out there.
Dodgeball.
Kind of, yeah. And do you remember that? So Jesus gets the ball, and the disciples kind of pile on him, and they're all laughing, and Jesus stays there with his eyes closed for a moment. And they're going, Jesus, wait a minute, are you okay? Jesus. And he opens his eyes and smiles. And it was just, I don't know if I want that. I really don't. But at the same time, I know that there had to be moments of lightheartedness with these disciples. There had to be moments. Should they have been included in the Bible? Probably not. But if Jesus is fully man, fully God, and humor is part of it.
Or
No
you
disrespect.
you gotta love the parts of the Passion of the Christ, right? He hits his mother with the water.
Right.
He,
Yeah.
he jokes around with the
Yeah.
chair at the table.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and there's no scriptural basis for that. Who's a wealthy man that would want to eat like that.
right,
Yeah.
And of course, Mary says, which was just a bad line, it'll never take. I can't imagine Mary saying,
Yeah.
it'll never take.
This isn't going to catch on.
That's what it was. Yeah, this isn't going to catch
That's
on.
not going to catch on.
Yeah, I don't think that vernacular was there back in those
I
days.
think, but I do think what Mel Gibson was trying to do was Jesus is fully God, fully man. So there has to be some lighthearted humor that doesn't disrespect him as deity, and doesn't disrespect his mission here on earth.
Yeah.
So that's it.
And I think when we do look, and getting back to we have just about another less than a minute left, when we look at this article, and I recommend you people reading it. It's good. It's by Armando Simon. It's in the American Thinker. It talks about how totalitarian regimes lack a sense of humor. And when we start seeing that happen in our country, where we start dissing humor, maybe it's something to be concerned about.
Yeah, I've never seen them. Well, I've seen some movies put up by India. Puts out lots of movies, and some of them are humorous. I don't remember a comedy put up by Iran. Let's say I just
Hard
don't.
to imagine.
Hard to imagine that. Yeah. So there you go.
Unfortunately, we are out of time.
Ba-dum-tsh.
I do want to thank Pastor Brendan DeForest, our guest today on Rebel, Religion in the News. And his service time is 10 o'clock on Sunday morning over on Moss Avenue, 750 Moss Avenue, 10 o'clock service time. Give him a look. And of course, Pastor Alfredo Romero's church is Rock of Life Fellowship, also 10 o'clock. Give him a shot. And remember to pray. And remember to go to church on Sunday. All right?
And remember to laugh.
And
Amen.
yes, and laugh. Enjoy yourself. God gave us comedy. He gave us humor. We should use it.
Joy is
Good
great
natured,
medicine.
good naturedly. So long.